Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today we got an absolutely fantastical story for you guys out there in the audience. Today we're going to talk about the city of Chicago. We're going to talk about the migrant crisis in the city of Chicago, to which we have made many a video about so far, and I've kept you updated every step of the way. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how Brandon Johnson is holding up, because apparently, according to these two reporters, he ain't doing too well. Apparently, the stress is taking its toll on our great mayor of the city of Chicago, this wonderful paragon of virtue signaling and wokeness, because Brandon Johnson, supposedly, again according to these two reporters, is being hospitalized with panic attacks over the migrant crisis. He's so stressed about this that he's having panic attacks and going to the hospital. That is the elected mayor, 1 year in office, Brandon Johnson, on the job right now. It's absolutely ridiculous, and we gotta talk about it. But before we do, thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. So I gotta give you guys a super quick recap before we get into this new information, because in order to understand where we are, you gotta understand how we got here. So, City of Chicago, like many cities across this country, was a sanctuary city. This is a policy that has been in place in our nation across major cities, across certain states, for a very long time. However, when the evil orange man was elected president because he ran on a platform that was anti-illegal immigration, the then mayor, Lori Lightfoot, signed what is known as a welcoming ordinance, which made them even more open to illegals, and said that they weren't going to check immigration status for welfare benefits for illegal immigrants. Now, this was very easy for the city of Chicago to do, considering that Illinois is thousands upon thousands of miles away from the Mexico border. But the thing is, Greg Abbott got sick of this. He got sick of all these left-wing cities voting nationally for presidential candidates that weren't going to do anything about the border. And you had in this last Democratic primary a bunch of different Democrats running on decriminalizing the border, migrants flooding to the border, and people who are not interested in doing anything about the millions of cases of asylum fraud that we're experiencing right now. So Greg Abbott decided that as a political stunt, he was going to start shipping the migrants to left-wing cities, to sanctuary cities, and specifically to cities that pass extra virtue signaling pieces of legislation like Chicago and the city of New York. And immediately, they declared states of emergencies. Immediately, they started panicking, and for a long time, the strategy put forward by Brandon Johnson was to just call the Texas governor an evil white racist, say that this is about slavery, and referencing a 400-year-old grudge against black people, and say that this was revenge for the Civil War, and that they were just angry that a black man was free.
It's the same right-wing extremism that refuses to accept the results of the Civil War. Right, this is the same political party that did not want to accept that President Obama was actually an American. It's the same Republican right-wing extremism that stormed the Capitol. It is abysmal, and it's an affront for everything that is good about this country. For the extremism in this country to use people as political tools to settle political scores for something that happened 400 years ago. They're still mad that a black man is free in this country.
Now, of course, Brandon Johnson, who is a racist, he is a race hustler. He got elected to the mayor of Chicago playing the race card. That's his only move that he can utilize against somebody like Greg Abbott, when all Greg Abbott is doing is saying, hey, you're a welcoming city. You want illegal migrants. Why don't you live up to your values? Here's some buses load of illegal migrants. And Brandon Johnson, while he's been rhetorically not changing and saying that he's welcoming and all that, behind the scenes has been working to stop migrants from coming to the city of Chicago, and they do that in a great number of ways. First and foremost, they don't provide the shelters needed for the migrants. They let them sleep out on the street in the cold. They hope that when winter is coming, they don't feel comfortable and they go to other cities. And in fact, Brandon Johnson went down to the border with a group of Chicago aldermen, and they specifically went there to tell migrants to stop coming to the city of Chicago, despite what he tells you in this clip right here.
Look, Pastor Will Hall, who's also an alderman of the 6th Ward, visited the border. He saw the chaos firsthand. And so part of our effort to go to the border was to make sure that there was better coordination with the flow of migrants who are seeking asylum here.
Now, the reason I like that clip so much from Brandon Johnson is that we actually have an interview from that specific alderman telling us exactly what he told to the migrants, and he quite literally told the migrants that if they come here, they're going to sleep on the floor, it's going to be super cold, there's no opportunities, so don't come here. And again, this is also on tape in reference to the same trip.
So people are beginning to get informed that it's cold, the opportunities are scarce, and that unless you want to sleep on a concrete mattress, don't come. And that's what those who have come seeking asylum have said.
But that's not all that Brandon Johnson has been doing, while saying that he's totally open to migrants coming to the city of Chicago to actually stop the flow of migrants from entering his city. He recently passed a bunch of different ordinances that allow the Chicago police to seize buses that drop off migrants, fine bus companies per migrant that they drop off, and he demanded a bunch of different border controls for the city of Chicago that, of course, he is against nationwide for everyone else.
Yeah, what we know is, as I've said repeatedly, the governor of Texas is determined to create chaos throughout the entire country. And this is after the city council passed an ordinance that I put forward to provide more structure, to provide more calm and some more coordination with how buses are arriving in the city of Chicago. And quite frankly, what's actually quite disturbing is that many of the individuals who are coming from the border, there's no coordination at the border either. So many of the individuals are not being treated, they're not being processed, they're not getting medical attention. So by the time they arrive in the city of Chicago, they're coming in quite severe conditions: cold, tired, wet, hungry, traumatized, the type of chaos that this governor is insistent on creating throughout this entire country. And so we've put forth very clear guidelines. You can drop families off. Buses can come to the city of Chicago between these particular hours. We have to have a 48-hour notice. We need a full manifest. We need to know who is on the bus, the conditions in which these individuals are arriving in, so that we can provide the type of care that's needed.
Again, it would be really nice if we could get a detailed manifest of people entering the United States of America, but apparently what's good for the goose is not good for the gander, and that is only a policy that is allowed to be put in place by woke Democratic mayors when they're starting to lose popularity over the fact that people don't like having all these illegals around.
What if the federal government doesn't help you?
Well, clearly they haven't thus far.
But is that sustainable? Because you've said it isn't sustainable.
I think you've answered it. No, it's not sustainable. The Congress does have to act. And if they do not act, this is going to continue to cause the type of chaos that the governor of Texas wants to do.
Now, what's great about this is that Governor Abbott is not taking this lying down. He's decided to bus migrants to the surrounding suburbs around the city of Chicago and fly them into O'Hare Airport. And now the bus companies are actually suing the city of Chicago for their clearly unconstitutional laws that they're passing, requiring these buses to get all these different permits, when obviously the goal is to prevent people from moving based on immigration status from one state to another. And apparently this is starting to take its toll on our buddy boy Brandon Johnson. Apparently this is starting to break his little itty bitty baby heart, because faced with all this pressure, Brandon Johnson is starting to crack. He's starting to panic. He's starting to have panic attacks. And to me, this is absolutely hilarious.
The community doesn't hold them accountable, no one else will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we certainly have seen, the drumming of that with the migrant influx, and we don't need to dive into that at this point, because it's, as we sit here and tape this, it's getting cold and snowy in Chicago, and Brandon Johnson has got his hands full to deal with that. But you've seen it. You have seen people, your community starting.
No amount of antidepressants can cure him of this problem.
No, he certainly was feeling the malaise.
I know it. It's so true. And I actually, you brought it up. I was going to bring it up, and I thought,
panic attacks. The mayor's panic attacks? Oh, can we talk about that?
So this conversation actually comes from WGN AM radio, and they're talking about a conversation that they had with two different reporters that documented Brandon Johnson having panic attacks to the point where he needed to be hospitalized over the migrant crisis. And they're explaining how this clearly and obviously shows that he's not a leader.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because two sources told me that he has been in the hospital for these panic attacks, and he is stressed out because this is a big job for him.
He wasn't ready for it.
He's not ready for it. He is not ready for it. He is not He's not a leader. I'm sorry. He's just not a leader.
Now, look, I don't know a lot about this radio station, and to me, and this could just be this guy's regular, ordinary voice, it sounds like one of the people is doing a Brandon Johnson impersonation, so possibly they're not friendly to the Johnson administration. But the thing is, when I'm listening to what they're saying about how this is clear and obvious and it shows that he's not a leader, how no amount of antidepressants are going to be sufficient in order to solve the migration crisis, I'm honestly in 100% agreement. I love everything about this, and I find this to be absolutely hilarious. Now, look, I understand that a lot of people are going to say, Sean, not fun to make fun of mental problems, and my intellectual brain understands to some extent that panic attacks are not a sign of weakness. They're just a thing that some people have to deal with. But the thing is, the caveman part of my brain says that this is clearly a sign of Brandon Johnson's weakness, and while it might be okay for some people to have psychological problems, this should be something that we screen for when we're electing officials that are meant to govern the city. It is an obvious part of governing that you have to deal with governing issues, and immigration is one of those issues. This would be one thing if Brandon Johnson had a sick family member, somebody who was causing him deep emotional distress in his day-to-day life, and that led to some kind of mental problem, that led to some kind of anxiety or panic attack or whatever. But migration, the migration crisis, that is a part of his administration. That is now a part of his duties. Administering resources to them is what his job entails, so he needs to be able to deal with it. The fact that his poll numbers are dropping specifically over this issue, the fact that Texas is calling their bluff and telling them to live up to their welcoming ordinance, the fact that these migrants are showing up and people are shouting at him, his voting base, black people in the city of Chicago, all of that should be tolerable by the guy who is holding the elected office of the mayor of Chicago. But the fact of the matter is, Brandon Johnson is soft. A lot of these progressives are soft. A lot of these politicians are soft. Democrats and Republicans, let's be perfectly honest. And he should not be in office if regular policy situations, even a policy emergency like this one, puts him in the hospital, puts him out of commission. He's not able to function because he's literally panicking.
But this immigration issue, boy, this is not helping him at all, this situation. And, you know, when you call yourself a sanctuary city, you call yourself a sanctuary state, guess what's going to happen? Don't blame Texas, because Texas, if you look at what they're dealing with, they have a massive influx. You see, we don't even show the videos on television. The amount of people that are just standing around, you know, and now they're desperate, because what happens when people don't have money or they don't have food? They start breaking into things. They start committing crimes. They start working for the cartels. They start doing human trafficking. They start becoming victims of human trafficking. So they had to do, what are they going to do with all these people? They had to get them out of their city. And, well, Sanctuary City, you're the welcoming city, so you're going to get what you asked for, or what you said you were.
Again, this is an absolutely excellent point. Greg Abbott, the people of Texas, have to deal with many times the surging migrants in their areas, and a lot of these migrants will show up in small towns in such big numbers that they outnumber the citizenry, and yet you don't hear about Greg Abbott having a panic attack. Greg Abbott can't even walk. He's in a wheelchair, and yet he is more able to stand up to scrutiny than Brandon Johnson is in this very moment. Excellent point by this station right here. What do you expect them to do with all these people? First of all, Brandon Johnson advocated for this. He said he wanted all these people in. He still calls them all asylum seekers. He still says that they're legal immigrants and all that. But as soon as he gets a taste, a percentage, barely even 1% of the migrant crisis in his city, he has to go to the hospital because he's so panicked by the idea of these people being in his city. It's absurd. It's insane. So great of this station to point out the utter hypocrisy, the ridiculousness of Brandon Johnson's administration. And anyone who says, oh, don't be mean, this is an issue of mental health, he's the one who holds all these positions and can't live up to them. If you are so pro-illegal immigration like Brandon Johnson is, and you want to call each and every person racist, but then when that doesn't work and you actually receive those illegal immigrants a taste of your own advocacy, that you end up being hospitalized at the prospect of owning up to what you called for, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. No excuses for him, no sympathy for him.
Anita, I never heard of anyone other than white socialist reporters and the Chapatistas, the hard leftists of Mexico, they come up here. Those are the only people that like the whole sanctuary city thing. I mean, most Latino immigrants didn't like it, as far as I knew, and they didn't care about it. They're just, leave me alone, let me work, let me take care of my kids, just shut up and get out of here. And now we're seeing the effects of this. It's a chaos, and these poor people are suffering. They didn't do anything. They're not the grandstanders.
Another great point. The people who love these kind of policies, the people who love and defend sanctuary cities, are left-wing reporters and far-left progressives, people who typically don't have to deal with the consequences of these policies. These are luxury beliefs. They're meant to be stated and shown off at cocktail parties, but once you actually have people live up to those beliefs, once you actually can't just show it off to your friends to say, oh, I'm so virtuous, I don't even think America can have a border, all of a sudden, that confrontation with reality is so startling, so stunning, that Brandon Johnson has to be hospitalized over it. He actually can't function without medical care, living up to his own luxury beliefs. Now look, I understand anybody can have mental health issues. I 100% get it, and I understand that some of the bravest, most badass men in our entire country, and women by the way, who serve in our United States Armed Forces, come back with trauma, and trauma that you can't just see on any kind of scan and have those kind of issues. So don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of you or anything like that. You went to war, you served in our military, you came back with the after effects, and it's a shame that our country does not treat you with the respect and give you the care that you need. But Brandon Johnson didn't do any of that stuff. Brandon Johnson said, give me illegals. People gave him illegals, and then he started crying and going to the hospital. That is not the same thing. I hope we understand that we're talking about different categories. Get it? Got it? Good. Now, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like. If you had a panic attack from this video, also tell me about that. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Brandon Johnson having an actual panic attack and being hospitalized over a policy that he advocated for. Till next time.